Hey folks, Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Jadwiga0700, who says, "What is justice?" Justice is that which Black Americans, women, LGBTQ folk, Latinx folk, disabled folk, chronically ill folk, mentally ill folk, and various other folk who find themselves disadvantaged and marginalized will find it even more difficult than usual to obtain these next 4 years, thanks to the results of the presidential election. And there are a couple of other questions to come about the presidential election. Plus, I'm going to do a separate sort of response video shortly. So I will just leave that subject there for now and move on to the next question, which is from Carlita La Otoringoloringolaga. Again, I really apologize for butchering your name. Anyway, Carlita asks, if I could ask a quick follow-up question related to my last question I forgot to ask, do you have any thoughts or advice on how I should handle this issue in America in everyday life, and especially in my university when they are calling out certain cultures with posters and propaganda such as guinea pigs, dogs are friends, not food, and therefore making people of other ethnicities like Latinos and East Asians feel judged or outed? Because it got to a point where I feel like leaving my university because of the posters and students thinking I or my culture are some kind of savage. I've even heard students make comments like, "Ew, Latinos eat guinea pigs. What's wrong with them? Is it fair for my university to do this? What should I do?" If you are that affected by it, I think it would be fair to talk to someone at the university. Talk to an administrator. Find out who's in charge of, putting up posters or deciding which posters should be allowed to stay when they're put up, and say, hey, look, this is very, very offensive to me. This is making me feel unwelcome on this campus, and I'm wondering if there's anything you can do about it. On a person-to-person basis, if you hear someone talking like that or someone says that to you, maybe approach them, find a way to sort of start a conversation about it in a friendly, non-aggressive way, but just sort of say, hey, look, this thing that you're saying about people from my culture or people from other cultures is really hurtful and really unfair and based on a kind of double standard that privileges the meat-eating choices of this culture and just sort of assumes that cultures that make other choices about which animals to eat and which animals not to eat are somehow automatically barbaric. Maybe that would help. Maybe if you let them know what they're doing and appeal to their humanity, maybe that would help. But I would also seriously consider having a word with someone at the school, someone in the administration, and see if there's something that can be done, because it seems like you're having a really hard time with it, and it seems extremely insensitive, to say the least. Carlisle the Cinephile, do you think there is any validity to Dusty's claims that the skeptic community has shifted their focus to attacking social justice movements because they got bored of attacking religious people and wanted to keep their channels alive by finding a new boogeyman? Or do you think the far more simple explanation is the accurate one? Personally, I believe that some are genuinely hate-filled people. Some are just pandering to maintain their audiences, and some want to be contrarian because they want to feel like they're smarter than everyone else. What are your thoughts? In this case, my thoughts are your thoughts. We are in exact agreement on this. I think that all of those things you say are true. And I do think that a lot of the anti-SJW sentiment is coming as a result of people who have built their channels and built their personas and just sort of organized their creative output around the form of attacking people, of making attack videos, of roasting people, of poning people. That is the only approach that they know. For many of these people, it's the only thing that they know how to do. That's the only way they know how to argue. When they talk about things like, oh, let's have a debate, let's have a discussion, let's have an argument, they're talking about doing what they do in their videos. They're talking about poning people, about, playing somebody else's video and letting them get a sentence out and then stopping and coming in with their own stuff and just talking about why that last sentence was wrong. And then, okay, here's another sentence. Here's another argument. Okay, here's why this is wrong. And just, that's all they do. That's all they know how to do. And when they ran out of targets who were religious folks, particularly who were creationists, they moved on to something else. And we all got to find out what shitty fucking people they are. Abioye Atupili. And again, I apologize if I completely ruined the pronunciation of that name. Hello, Steve. I'm a few weeks new to your channel. It's mad chill. This will be my first question. It's a bit long. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm a mixed boy, part African, Indian, and Mexican, and I'm an atheist. Because I have so much family from all over, I'm connected to lots of cultures, and this exposes me to things I have a hard time dealing with. As I'm sure you know, there are places in Africa and India and Latin America that struggle with poverty and education. Naturally, many well-meaning people try to go to these places to help. Often it tends to be Christian missionaries. A lot of time when Christian missionaries go to help people in these places, their intention isn't just to help, but to convert. Steve, honestly, I get very angry, upset, and also confused. I know many of these Christian missionaries are trying to help, but it angers me when the price of accepting help is to give up part of your identity. But at the same time, I feel like an ass for complaining about these American Christians going to these places to help out financially, because they do help. They build schools, help with education, food, water, and I'm grateful for that. But they also bring in church, Bibles, Christianity, etc. But sometimes it makes me feel that conversion is more important to these people than helping out. It makes me wonder, next time I am in a situation like that, should I confront them? Should I warn people in the villages? Should I tell them to keep their religion out of this? Can you give me any advice or thoughts on how to deal with this whole thing in general? Any thoughts on Christian missionaries and washing people's cultures? You're right to be upset by it, and I think you're right to be troubled by it and conflicted by it. It would be wonderful if all of these Christian missionaries decided that doing God's work should only consist of helping people in need, not of forcing your religion on them at the cost of their own religion or their own culture. It would be wonderful if more churches in the United States and around the world who did missionary work took that attitude and said, you know what? We believe that our God is telling us to go out into the world and spread love and spread joy and spread charity, and we're going to help people, and we're not going to force our beliefs on them. We're just going to give them what they need. We're going to build their houses. We're going to build their schools. We're going to build their hospitals. We're going to give them medical supplies. We're going to teach them to read. We're going to dig their wells. We're going to do all the things that they need to be done. And we are not going to ask anything. We're not going to require anything. We are not going to proselytize to them. We're going to allow them to keep their beliefs and keep their culture and allow it to naturally develop. We're going to respect them and respect their society. And we're just going to help where we can. That would be wonderful. But I think you're right. I think for many Christian missionary organizations, the help, the charity, the digging the well, the building the hospital is just the lure. You know, it's just the cheese in the mousetrap. And that is a terrible shame. Because not only does it destroy native cultures and warp native societies, but it taints the good work that they do. So I completely agree with you. As for what should you do about it, I mean, I don't know what would be gained by confronting the missionaries themselves, because I'm sure most of them are absolutely convinced and holding an unshakable conviction that they are doing the right thing by sharing their faith with these people. But yeah, maybe if having a word with the people there, having the word with people in the village, people in the town, people who are being targeted by proselytizers. Let them know, say, hey, if they offer you help, if they offer you medical supplies, if they offer to help you, repair your house or dig a well or build a school or educate your kids, like, absolutely, take them up on that. That's wonderful. But keep in mind that they're going to try to convert you to their religion too. And if you're not into that, you don't have to do that. Ahoy or no, a political question asked before the general election and to be answered afterwards. Today is November 4th. Will the current president be a single-term president, given current levels of distrust, being out of touch with the base and other factors like that? If yes, will the current president be ousted in the primary or replaced by the other party in 2020? I'm really dreading a Trump presidency. You're in the future. Do you have some comforting words, given the current situation, in your location in the time stream? Those of us who feel threatened by the election result, those of us who feel endangered by it, or even those of us who just feel profoundly let down by about 60 million of our fellow Americans. We can't lose sight of the fact that that we have each other to lean on. And there are plenty of people in this country who are aware of what is going on, who see what is happening, who know what Trump represents, who know what Trump is, and know what he will try to do in the next 4 years, and are ready to do what is necessary to stop him. And that might not sound hopeful, that might not sound encouraging, but to me that sounds like resolve. And I will take resolve in light of what happened this week. I will take resolve, and I will do whatever I can to push forward from here. Batman vs. Superman is better than Superman Returns. Heroes that kill are cool. Wrestling sucks, but not as much as SR. Something tells me that I'm being trolled with that handle. But anyway, is it wrong to judge on race and ethnicity based on statistics? I hope I can explain what I mean. I'm a Mexican man. I live near a town that has many ex-cons, especially from a prison that has a high concentration of the Aryan Brotherhood, which is a white supremacist gang, and in this town, most crimes are committed by whites. In order to join that gang, you have to kill or attempt to kill either a black or Latino man, so I'm the ethnicity of the initiation options. When I'm around these parts, I tend to be afraid of white people, suspicious of white people. Statistically, if we are just looking at numbers, if I am in these areas, my chances of being killed by a white person are much higher than any other race. When I'm walking in those streets, I find myself crossing the street to avoid white people. But I'm wondering, is it wrong to think based on race, even if you base it off statistics? I'm wondering because I'm confused on this issue. I'm sorry if I offended anyone. I don't think that there is anything wrong with drawing conclusions, broad conclusions based on statistics about large groups of people. I think what makes it racist is when you take that broad knowledge, you take that broad observation, you take that trend, we'll just call it a trend. The trend in your town is that most of the crimes are committed by white people, and that this white supremacist gang that targets Latinos and blacks is prevalent. If you take that broad knowledge and then you begin applying it indiscriminately to every white person that you encounter. In other words, you're not just saying, well, I'm in this particular part of town where I know these people are and I know that they do these sorts of things, therefore I'm going to be extra careful. You're saying there's a white person, he's probably an Aryan brother, so I'm going to cross the street. Now, that I think is problem. That I think is the kind of thinking that you want to avoid. Because if you think it about that random white guy over there, you're probably going to feel compelled to think that way about that white guy over there. And you might find yourself in another part of town or in another town altogether. You might be walking through a mall 100 miles away in a place that doesn't have the same issues that the place where you're from does. And you'll see a white person and you'll want to cross to the other side. You won't trust the white person because you will assume that because he is white, he means you harm and he is a greater threat to you than someone else would be because he's white. That's where I think you start getting into racism. And that's the kind of thinking that I think we should avoid, because that is precisely the kind of thinking that I object to when I hear it applied to black folks. When people try to make excuses for the racial disparities in law enforcement by saying, well, black people commit more crimes. Why shouldn't cops be more suspicious of black people? Black people commit most of the crimes. And they're taking what they perceive as a trend and they are applying it to every single black person. They're saying the mere fact that you are black means that you are more likely to be a criminal, or means that a police officer who sees you should regard you with more suspicion automatically because you're black. That's racism. That's not cool. That's what I think needs to be avoided. Drawing broad conclusions about groups of people or parts of town or, types of people who do different types of behavior more than others. I don't think any of that is a problem. It's when you take those statistics and you start applying them indiscriminately to every single person who is a member of that group. That's when you run into trouble. Emily Charette, Steve, I'd ask how things are for you, but if the elections are any result, I'd imagine that things are as unbelievably crappy for you as they are for me. Being a transgender woman as I am, they're especially difficult. This also creates quite a conundrum. Surfing on the web, I've seen a number of blogs which argue the fact that cobbling 50 states is simply unwieldy and grotesque. I didn't give this much thought until Chancellor Trump took over. Now it seems to be a reality. Am I missing something? If it is indeed a reality, what steps should I take? Thanks. Well, I apologize. I'm not exactly certain what you mean by cobbling 50 states, so I'm just going to sort of interpret this question in my own way and talk about the fact that I think one of the things that the election result reveals, as I mentioned in an answer to a previous question, is that the problems that I think we all knew affected the United States already are much deeper and much more intractable than we thought, and have a much greater influence or potential influence over our politics than we thought. Again, some of us have been on to this the whole time. Some of us have taken a little bit longer to figure it out. But one of the most disappointing things about the election result is having to confront the fact that in the minds of many people, in the minds of at least about 60 million people in this country who voted for Donald Trump, we are not in this together. I just said in the answer to that other question a few questions ago that, we should take solace in the fact that, hey, we have each other. We're all in this together. 60 million people who voted for Donald Trump don't feel that way. Or if they might say they feel that way, but they don't act as though they feel that way. They voted for a man who has done nothing but vilify and demagogue and divide people for over a year, and they weren't bothered by that. That didn't strike them as a reason not to vote for him. They voted for a man who has demeaned and degraded and assaulted women for decades and admitted to it. And that didn't bother them. That didn't strike them as a reason to vote for someone else. What should you do about it? You should organize. You should find groups, political groups, advocacy groups, activist groups who are figuring out what to do. You should find out what you can do to help. You should do it. You should start thinking about who you're going to vote for in 2 years when the midterm elections come up. You should start thinking about how you are going to show the Republican Party and President Trump where your priorities are and how you make your voice heard. Midterm elections have historically had low voter turnout, and midterm elections in the last 8 years have been the instances where progressive policies, where the achievements of the Democratic Party or a Democratic president or Democratic legislators in state legislatures have been threatened because liberals, Democrats, progressives don't show up to vote in midterm elections. Republicans, conservatives do, and they win, and they gain enough power to either institute their own policies or to at least stop the liberals and the Democrats, the progressives, from instituting their policies. So show up in 2 years at the midterm election and get your friends to show up. Turn out the vote. Vote for Democrats. Vote for progressives. Elect as many liberal, progressive people to as many offices as you possibly can. If you can afford it, support organizations like the ACLU, like Planned Parenthood, organizations that will be fighting President Trump and fighting for you and for people who are marginalized and threatened by the likes of President Trump and Vice President Pence. for the next 4 years. Support those organizations. Do whatever you can to help them. Find out what you can do and do it, and get other people to do it. And take care of yourself as best you can. Protect yourself. Make sure that you're safe. Make sure that you have what you need. If you need help, ask for help. Make sure that you make it through. Make sure that you make it through the next 4 years. I don't know what else I can say other than I wish that something else had happened on Tuesday. And I hope that you're okay. And it seems very heavy to do a transition from that to the next segment. So I won't make a joke. We'll just consider this a clean break, and then we'll start the next segment fresh, because the next segment is a little something I like to call
The Lightning Round.
Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. Yo, Steve, I hope you're ready for a video game related question, so here I go. Which side would you prefer and why? Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter? I gotta go Mortal Kombat on that. I don't have a huge amount of experience playing video games, but in the early 90s, mid 90s, I guess, when Mortal Kombat first came out, the original, I played that thing all the time. And I don't have the same experience with Street Fighter. I didn't play it very much, so I don't have the nostalgia for it. So I'm going to go Mortal Kombat. Specific hieroglyphics. Who's the best, least awful president the United States has never had? From an outsider looking in, it'd seem like Al Gore would get shit done with climate change, and he'd have most certainly responded to Katrina a lot better than Bush. What do you think? Yeah, I think Al Gore would have been a terrific president. Certainly would have been better than George W. Bush. I would also nominate Alexander Hamilton. Really one of the only, he and Ben Franklin are the only major, well-known founding fathers who never got a shot, who never got a turn at being chief executive. I would be interested to see how Alexander Hamilton would do in the big chair, since he already had such a profound influence on our government and our country as Treasury Secretary. Someone wrote a musical about it. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Existential Anarchist. If you were to write a book, what would be its topic and name? It would be titled Here Lies an Irreverent Man and Other Things that I hope are written on my tombstone, and it would be a series of essays just about topics that are important to me, or the sort of person that I would like to be, and what my priorities are, and all that other, just a bunch of narcissistic bullshit. Sabrina Lozides Meredith, another holiday related question for you. You said in years past that you don't buy new Christmas albums, but will that change this year when Leslie Odom Jr. puts out his album this week? Are you going to indulge, Hamilton fan that you are? And have you bought his jazz album? Because it is fantastic. I have not bought his jazz album, but thank you for the reminder. I believe I will have to splurge and check that out. And yeah, I'll probably check out the Christmas album too. Isn't it? You remember a couple months ago when Radical Bacon asked me, I know you don't like musicals, but would you check out Hamilton? And I was like, nah. And then I listened to the soundtrack, and now it's like taking over my life. Life's funny, isn't it? Andrew Lawrence, what movies would you hate to see remade? And are there any you think should be remade? I mean, I'm sure there are. It depends on the filmmaker. It depends on the take that they have, the approach that they have to the material. I mean, remakes can be great, but they're not. It's just not how I think. It's just not something that I don't think of movies and go, oh, that'd be great for a remake. Movies that I absolutely would never want to see remade. I mean, Casablanca. What's the point of that? My favorite movie, Sherlock Jr., pretty much anything like Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, because they're so associated with those artists. I just wouldn't want to see those remade. Radical Bacon, there she is. So Beyonce and the Dixie Chicks performed at the Country Music Awards, and racist fuckwads got their underwear in a twist. Should I point and laugh? Oh, sweetheart, yes. Now more than ever, you should point and laugh. Now more than ever, you should point and laugh at the racist fuckwads. Never stop pointing and laughing at the racist fuckwads. And also, don't forget to vote against them. Vitamin W, in a previous you had to ask, you said that the child of Picard and Sherlock Holmes would be perfect, since one of them hates kids and the other is a high-functioning psychopath. How could you say that? Well, here's my thinking. Picard is in Starfleet, so he's going to be off planet on the Enterprise for most of the time, so he's not even going to see the kid for very much. And Sherlock is going to be on Earth, but he doesn't really like kids. I can't imagine Sherlock as a parent, so Watson is going to end up raising the kid, and Watson would be a great dad. Tricky Green, I apologize if this has been answered in another video, but are you, Steve, planning on doing another Atheist Reads? Does anyone else know? I miss them. Well, thank you for asking, and I'm glad you enjoy them. Yes, in January. The way my production cycle works, every January is when I start the An Atheist Read series, and I do 3 books a year, although this year I did do 4. Next year is going to be 3 again, and it starts in January, and I do a series, and then I take 2 weeks off and do Steve and Stuffy videos, then I do the next book, 2 weeks off, Steve and Stuffy videos, the next book, and then Steve and Stuffy for the rest of the year. That's the way the production cycle works. So in January, yes, there will be a new An Atheist Read series starting then, and there will be a total of 3 Atheist Read series in 2017. Thank you so much for asking. Thanks for the question. That was the last question of the video. It is time now for the shout out of the week, and the shout out this week goes to my buddy, my pal, someone that I was actually in a hangout with earlier this week, a pre-election hangout, all those blissful pre-election days of Monday. Anyway, the shout out this week goes to my pal, American Anarchist. He is a fellow American. I am not a fellow anarchist, but that's okay. We can have a different opinion on that. He's a really sharp, really smart guy. He has educated me a little bit on some anarchist theories and principles. I still don't consider myself an anarchist, but I'm glad to have such a smart and educated and well-informed friend as American Anarchist. In addition to being a good source to talk to about anarchism, he's just a really great progressive voice. He's yet another one of these young YouTubers who I think will be the salvation of us, who will save us from the anti-feminist, anti-social justice douchebags who have overrun the atheist, secular, skeptical corner of YouTube for far too long. American Anarchist is one of the good guys, and he is a good guy. I can vouch for that personally. And he has a good YouTube channel, and he does good work, and you should check him out, American Anarchist. That's the shout out. I also want to tell you, as I always do around this time in the You Had to Ask videos, that you should be listening to the Lemme Listen podcasts. The Lemme Listen podcasts are the creation of my very good friend Jason Harding, and there are a whole bunch of Lemme Listen podcasts. There's, first of all, Lemme Finish, the original, which Jason co-hosts with Finite Atticus. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, the hilarious improv comedy podcast. There's Filmtastic Voyage, which is hosted by Mike and Alex. There's Cinetific, which is co-hosted by Jason and Aaron. And last but not least, there is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that is hosted by Jason and me, where we take a classic film, we give it a fresh review, we summarize it, we make fun of it, and we tell you whether we think the movie lives up to its reputation, whether that reputation is for good or bad. And I really hope that you listen to this week's episode of Late Seating, because the subject is the 1915 film by D.W. Griffith, The Birth of a Nation. And we recorded this episode before the election. The episode has nothing directly to do with the election of Donald Trump at all, but a lot of the things we talk about, a lot of the issues we talk about in relation to Birth of a Nation, racism, white supremacy, are issues that are of very urgent concern in our country right now and will continue to be for at least the next 4 years, and probably for a lot longer than that. So it's a really, really great podcast. And even though we're talking about some really heavy stuff and we're talking about one of the most depressing movies ever, it's also a lot of fun. I think it's one of our best shows that we've ever done. So check out our Late Seating podcast review of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. I am really proud of this one. You can listen to it. It goes up live today, the same day that this video goes up, so you can probably listen to it right now. You can listen to it, all of our past episodes of Late Seating, all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcasts.com. You won't be sorry. That's the Steve guarantee, which isn't a thing, but trust me on this. You'll like the Lemme Listen podcast if you've never checked him out before. That's it, everybody. I want to remind you, as always, to leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until the next video, take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.